In the warm hush of twilight, where the world tilts gently toward sleep, there stands a city within a city, older than nations, wiser than empires, and more secretive than any palace the world has known. Vatican City, 100 acres of sacred stone, bound by high walls and low voices. To many, it is the beating heart of the Roman Catholic Church, a place of ritual, doctrine, and divine legacy. But to those who listen, truly listen, there is something else, a breath beneath the prayers, a whisper behind the throne, and perhaps behind that whisper, a question that has lingered for centuries. What is the greatest secret the Vatican has ever kept? Not all silence is holy. Some is strategic. Some is terrified. The throne of St. Peter, carved from time and myth, is more than a seat. It is a symbol, radiant and immovable. Upon it, pope after pope has sat, adorned in robes of white and gold, their words shaping centuries, their decisions echoing into distant lands. But behind the visible holiness lies another Vatican, a quieter one of locked archives sealed, runes and quiet glances exchanged under frescoed ceilings dot. It is a realm where knowledge is power, and power is too delicate to sheer dot over the centuries. The Vatican has been many things, a beacon of hope, a gatekeeper of morality, a home to saints and sinners alike. But it has also been a vault, not just of gold or treasures, but of truth, carefully selected truth, curated history, a slow-turning wheel of revelation and restraint. And in that restraint lies the beginning of our story. There are tales you see, not shouted from pulpits, but murmured between scholars, whispered in halls of theology, or left in the footnotes of banned books. Tales of documents hidden deep in the Vatican Apostolic Archive, once called the Secret Archive, until even that title felt too honest. Tales of letters never answered, of ancient scrolls quietly buried beneath centuries of dust and deference, and some say of cover-ups, not one, not many, but perhaps one, towering and trembling above all others, a secret so vast, so unspoken, that it became holy through absence alone. But to understand this possibility, this ghost of truth, we must go gently back in time, to the roots of Rome, to the moment when faith met power, and secrecy became survival. Imagine the first. Centuries after Christ, Rome was still a beast of empire, its gods many, its rulers divine in their own eyes. Christianity was young, fragile, hunted, whispered in catacombs and candle smoke. The early church had no walls, no marble, no choir of robes, just belief, fierce, dangerous belief. Then came Constantine. With him, a shift, sudden, strange, and seismic. The persecuted faith became the chosen one. From ashes and blood, the church rose into structure. It took shape, and in doing so began to protect not only souls, but itself. Power entered the story, and where power grows, so too does the instinct to guard, to filter, to decide which truths the world is ready for, or perhaps which truths it can never know. From that moment forward, the Vatican became more than a place of prayer. It became a keeper of history. It chose which Gospels to canonize and which to cast out. It held councils, convened theologians, and quietly closed the doors on uncomfortable pages. Not out of malice, necessarily, but out of fear of confusion, fear of doubt, fear that a single unguarded truth might unweave the tapestry of belief. It became, in a way, the world's most sacred curator. A balance was struck between the divine and the political, between revelation and preservation, and as centuries passed, the Church grew, not only in devotion, but in documentation, tomes and scrolls, maps and letters, lists and secrets, all slowly descending into what we now call the archive. This archive, whispered about more than studied, is not mythical. It is real. It exists. 35,000 volumes and counting, stretching across miles of shelving beneath Vatican soil. It is said that the oldest documents reach back to the 8th century, some, perhaps further still. Only the Pope and a small group of trusted scholars are allowed to enter. Even then, only specific documents may be requested, and even then, many are denied. One must ask, why? Why, in an age of openness, does this chamber of knowledge remain veiled? What pages are too precious to be seen? What history too dangerous to be remembered? We do not ask with anger. We ask with reverence, for even silence, when carried long enough, begins to hum. Over time, rumors filled the quiet that the Church possessed hidden gospels, writings of Mary Magdalene or of Jesus himself, that it harbored records of early miracles the world was not ready to believe, that it knew of extraterrestrial encounters or dark alliances made in ages past. Some of these may be fantasies, but the fact remains, where silence reigns, stories bloom. And the Vatican, whether intentionally or not, has cultivated a garden of unspoken things. From the fall of the Templars to the trial of Galileo, from forbidden books to political intrigues and financial mysteries, the Vatican has long danced. Between the divine and the deeply human, between soul and state, between light and shadow, and through it all, one question continues to flicker at the edge of the candlelight. What truth lies too deep to be spoken aloud? Not for scandal, not for headlines, but for understanding. For the simple, aching desire to know. Tonight, we do not accuse. We do not demand. We simply listen. We let the past breathe. The greatest cover-up the Vatican has ever known may not be sinister. It may not be shameful. It may simply be fragile, too wondrous or too shattering to hold up to the cold light of day. And so, we begin our journey not with condemnation, but with calm curiosity, to walk gently into the silence. 2. Hear what has not been said, to wander slowly toward the greatest mystery ever held behind the Vatican's walls. Close your eyes now. Let the centuries unfurl, and follow the whisper behind the throne. It begins, as so many secrets do, in a hallway with no windows. Stone beneath, silence above. Light filters in gently from distant arches. You can hear your own breath and the soft hush of centuries settling like dust on polished shelves. You have entered the Vatican Apostolic Library, or at least the edges of it, but to say you are inside would be misleading. No, one truly is, because this is not just a library. This is a vault of memory, a sanctuary of the sacred and the withheld, where knowledge is carefully tended, like flame in a windstorm, flickering always between preservation and disappearance. The Vatican Library has long been spoken of in whispers, half in awe, half in suspicion. It is one of the oldest libraries in the world, its roots reaching back to the 4th century, though officially established in 1475. Since then it has grown quietly, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, slowly, deliberately. UNFORGETTABLY. Houses over 1.1 million printed books, 75,000 manuscripts, and more than 8,000 incunabula, those rarest of early printed texts from before the year 1500. And yet, the numbers mean less than the silence. For what makes the Vatican Library so mysterious is not what is listed, but what is not. There are books even the cardinals cannot read. Documents whose titles are known, but whose contents remain untouched. Letters sealed with ancient wax. Maps depicting lands that do not exist. And texts said to alter the course of belief or undo it altogether. One might ask, why hide a book? Is not knowledge at its core sacred? But in the eyes of the Church, knowledge is more than illumination. It is responsibility, it is power, and power, when misused, becomes dangerous. A fragile soul, they believe, must be shielded from confusion, from heresy, from the weight of questions too large for certainty. So over the centuries, the Vatican has done what it believed necessary. It guarded the truth, not always by proclaiming it, but sometimes by shelving it far out of reach to walk through the library, for those few who are allowed is to walk not just through a repository of wisdom, but a carefully curated world. Books are not placed randomly. Manuscripts are catalogued not merely by topic, but by trust, by whether they align with doctrine, whether they cast doubt, whether they stir questions that sleep best. Some rooms are open, others sealed by layers of hierarchy. You may ask for a manuscript, but you may not receive it. You may glimpse a title, the Gospel of the Egyptians or the Apocryphon of John, but never the pages within. You may suspect, even believe, but you will not be certain. And certainty, in a place like this, is a luxury rarely given. One such manuscript, fragile, faded, and hidden, is whispered about in monastic circles. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It is said to contain words spoken by Jesus that never appeared in the canonical Gospels. Words that suggest a deeper, perhaps even equal, relationship between teacher and disciple, between man and woman. For centuries that idea was dangerous, still is to some. Does the Vatican possess the full text? Some say yes, others say no, but the question itself echoes through the halls, as do hundreds of others. Was there a sixth gospel? Did early Christians believe in reincarnation? Are there letters from Jesus' own hand or writings from his missing years between boyhood and ministry? So many pages, so few eyes. Among the most mysterious artifacts is the Codex Vaticanus, one of the oldest nearly complete manuscripts of the Greek Bible. It dates to the 4th century and is held in a controlled chamber under constant surveillance. It's not hidden exactly. Scholars may access parts of it, but even here, parts remain darkened, blurred by time or policy. Then there are the letters between kings and popes, between explorers and bishops, between scientists and inquisitors. Some are mere footnotes of history, others pivotal. There are rumored to be correspondences from the Medici, Da Vinci, even whispers of ancient Arab scholars, and Chinese monks whose insights challenged church views long before. Galileo ever looked to the stars. Some of these letters are public. Others have never been seen again. Not burned, not erased, just quietly removed from sight. The Church has long defended its discretion, and there is logic in that. The chaos of misinformation, the delicacy of unverified claims, the danger of allowing every theory to take root in sacred soil, these are real concerns. But where there is curation, there is also omission. And where there is omission, there grows the possibility of cover up. Not necessarily evil, not even intentional, but still a kind of veiling, a holy shadow. In recent years, a handful of scholars and journalists have been granted limited access to the archive and library. With gloves and reverence, they pore over ancient vellum and ink, hoping to glimpse something that shifts the edges of known history. Some come away enlightened, others unsettled. Many come away with more questions than they had before. In 2010, the Vatican began digitizing parts of its library, aiming to eventually make 80,000 manuscripts publicly available. A noble step, a modern gesture, but still only a fraction, and always curated. The rest, the locked drawers, the sealed folios, the untitled spines remain silent. Waiting. And so we are left with this, a library not of stone and mortar, but of tension, a quiet battlefield between reverence and revelation, between what is preserved and what is protected. From us. We may never know what sleeps within the forbidden shelves, whether lost gospels, suppressed discoveries, or merely misunderstood poetry from another age. But we know this. The Vatican Library is not just a home for books. It is a mirror. It reflects the hopes, fears, and choices of those who have walked the thin line between knowledge and belief. And perhaps that is its greatest mystery. Not what it hides, but why it hides it at all. So close your eyes now. Let the rustle of parchment drift through your thoughts. Feel the hush of the ancient hallways, the breath of candlelight on vellum, and imagine, just for a moment, that one of those unread books was meant for you. A story long forgotten, softly waiting to be found. Perhaps one day it will be, but for now, let it rest, let it sleep, and let your dreams drift deeper into the hidden pages of time. There is a hush that comes just before power changes hands, a sacred stillness, not of peace, but of tension, as the old world exhales and the new breathes in. In the 4th century, such a hush swept across the Roman Empire, and in the stillness stood a man, draped in imperial purple, marked by battle, shadowed by prophecy, Constantine the Great, a pagan by birth, a Christian by vision, an emperor by force, and perhaps a saint by design. But within his reign lies a mystery not easily named, a parchment, an edict, a gift or a forgery that would crown the Church with worldly power and spiritual supremacy. Tonight we unroll this silent scroll and trace the ink of one of history's most elegant illusions, the donation of Constantine. When Constantine rose to power, Rome was still fractured, an empire divided not only by borders but by belief. Pagan temples towered over marketplaces while Christianity crept in shadows, outlawed but undeterred. Then came the vision. A cross in the sky, a voice perhaps, a dream of destiny. In this sign you will conquer. And conquer he did. At the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 A.D., Constantine emerged victorious, claiming rule over the Western Roman Empire. Soon after, the Edict of Milan followed, granting Christianity legal status and ending centuries of persecution. To many, this was the moment faith triumphed. To others, it was the moment faith became political. The Church, once forged in suffering, now stood beside the throne of Caesar, and in time it would receive more than favor. It would receive land, power, authority, not in spirit alone, but in legal deed, and that deed was the donation, allegedly written by Constantine himself. The donation of Constantine was a gift of breathtaking magnitude. In it, the emperor claimed he had been miraculously healed of leprosy by Pope Sylvester I in gratitude. He transferred authority over Rome, the western provinces, and countless imperial privileges to the Pope and his successors. It was, in essence, a divine inheritance, a parchment that made the Pope not only shepherd of souls, but ruler of kings, and for nearly 800 years no one questioned it. The donation became the cornerstone of papal temporal authority. It was invoked in coronations, cited in political disputes. It justified the Church's growing dominion over lands, cities, and courts. And yet, even as it empowered the papacy, a whisper lingered in monastic libraries and scholars' minds. Did Constantine truly write this? Could one of the greatest acts of imperial generosity be a fabrication? Centuries passed. Few dared ask. But then, in the glow of the Renaissance, when the world awoke to art, reason, and ancient doubt, one man finally spoke aloud. Lorenzo Valla, a humanist, scholar, and quiet heretic of thought. In 1440, he published a small but seismic treatise on the falsely believed and forged donation of Constantine. With meticulous analysis, Valla studied the Latin of the document, and what he found sent tremors through the foundation of papal history. The language, he argued, was anachronistic. Terms and phrasing used in the donation simply did not exist in Constantine's time. The titles, the references, even the syntax, all pointed not to the 4th century, but to the 8th. In short, the donation was a forgery, a beautiful one, a brilliant one, but a forgery nonetheless. Valla's work was bold, perhaps too bold. For centuries the Church ignored or dismissed his findings. The donation continued to be revered, more symbolic than literal perhaps, but still sacred. And yet the truth had already slipped through the cracks. By the time of the Reformation, Valla's arguments had been embraced by critics of the papacy. Martin Luther would call the donation a fictitious monstrosity. And even within the Church, voices grew quieter when speaking of its origins. Eventually, by the 17th century, the Vatican itself acknowledged what could no longer be denied. The donation was not written by Constantine. It was likely created during the reign of Pope Stephen II in the mid-700s, during a time of deep political vulnerability, when the Church needed protection from the Lombards and Byzantine neglect. The forgery may have been born not from greed, but from desperation. But here, dear listener, the mystery deepens. For even if the donation was false, its effect was very real. It shaped empires, empowered popes, redefined Europe's political landscape for centuries. Can a lie that changes the world be called only a lie? Or does it become something else? A myth woven into history too impactful to unravel? And what does it mean that the Vatican carried this parchment for centuries? Perhaps knowing its origin, perhaps not, but choosing always to honor the illusion. This is where the whisper behind the throne becomes a murmur through time. Did the Vatican know? Was the truth buried, not by malice, but by belief in something greater than facts? Or was it a political maneuver, one that worked too well to ever undo? In the Vatican Library, the original manuscript of the donation no longer survives, but its memory lingers, not in ink, but in influence. And in the archives one might still find letters, notes, and quiet apologies, confessions without penance, histories waiting not to be rewritten, but gently re-examined. There is a lesson here resting softly in the folds of time, that even holy institutions are made of men, that power, like parchment, can be reshaped by hand, by fear, by hope, and that sometimes the most enduring truths are not the ones written, but the ones believed. So let us not judge too harshly. Let us simply understand, for in the tale of Constantine's Crimson Edict, we see not only a forgery, but a mirror held up to the soul of history. Now let the lights dim. The parchment has been folded. The ink has faded. The illusion, perhaps, has lifted, but the story still lingers in the air, like incense after the last hymn. Close your eyes. Let the whisper guide you further, deeper into the halls of hidden faith, where truth and myth hold hands in the dark, and sleep gently in the knowledge that even empires are sometimes built on dreams. Beneath a moon cloaked in silence, a shadow moved through the narrow streets of Paris in the early hours of a cold autumn morning. Not a thief, not a soldier, but knights sworn to a secret order, steeped in faith, mystery, and an impossible legacy. The Knights Templar. For nearly 2 centuries, they had been the Church's sword and shield warriors, bankers, protectors of pilgrims and secrets alike. Their white mantles emblazoned with the red cross had become a symbol of divine authority and earthly power. But on one fateful night in 1307, the very foundation of their existence crumbled. Under the orders of King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, dozens of Templars were arrested, accused of heresy, blasphemy, and worse. The charges were dark and whispered: idol worship, secret rituals, forbidden knowledge. But historians have long wondered, was there more than politics at play? Was the suppression of the Templars a way to bury truths too dangerous to live? Because where there is silence, stories begin to murmur that the Templars had amassed extraordinary wealth and influence, banking for kings and popes alike. They controlled vast estates stretching across Europe and the Holy Land. They were rumored to possess relics beyond imagining, fragments of the true cross, perhaps even the Holy Grail itself. If any order might know the Vatican's greatest secrets, it was they. If any group held keys to hidden chambers of faith and power, it was the Templars. And yet in the cold grip of dawn, they were branded heretics, arrested en masse, and imprisoned in dungeons that smelled of betrayal and old stone. King Philip's accusations may have been a veil, a smokescreen to seize Templar treasure and eliminate a political threat. But the Church itself was complicit. Pope Clement V, under pressure and fear, reluctantly issued the order to disband the order, condemning its members despite doubts about their guilt. In whispered convent halls and shadowed chambers, rumors spread that the Templars had dared to delve into forbidden knowledge, that their secret initiation rites uncovered truths about Christ and his lineage that the Church could not bear to reveal. They had become too powerful, too enlightened, too dangerous. One of the darkest nights in history closed the Templars' chapter, but the story did not end. Legends say many escaped, taking with them scrolls and artifacts, disappearing into the mists of Europe and beyond. Some say they found refuge in secret societies, guarding the Church's greatest secrets from the very institution that condemned them. Others whisper of coded manuscripts hidden deep beneath Paris, where the echoes of prayer and conspiracy intertwine. The truth sleeps beneath the surface, veiled in the faint flicker of torchlight, waiting for the patient to find it. The centuries the Templar myth grew, blending fact and fable like the slow weaving of a tapestry. From Da Vinci's enigmatic works to modern novels, their legacy has been immortalized as guardians of sacred mysteries. But beyond legend lies a question that gently rocks the foundation of faith and history alike. What did the Templars truly know? And why was it so essential to silence them? Tonight, let us not rush toward answers. Instead, let us breathe in the stillness of their disappearance. Let us imagine those brave knights, cloaked in moonlight, stepping quietly into the shadows, holding close secrets that could shake the very pillars of belief. As you close your eyes, feel the weight of centuries fold over you, the silence of dungeons, the flicker of hidden fires, the echo of footsteps fading into legend. And know that some mysteries, like the night itself, are meant to be savored in quiet darkness, whispering softly as you drift toward sleep. In the hush of candlelight, words once whispered in secret find their way onto fragile parchment. But not all stories survive the passage of time. Some are silenced before they can be told, their voices swallowed by flames licking hungry and unforgiving. Throughout history, the Church has stood as both guardian and judge of knowledge and arbiter of what can be read and what must be hidden. In libraries vast and austere, many texts were preserved with reverence, yet others were marked as dangerous, heretical, blasphemous, or too powerful for mortal minds. They were condemned to the pyre, their pages crumpled to ash, their authors condemned to oblivion, their ideas erased like shadows chased from a candlelit room. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the index of forbidden books, became a symbol of control and censorship. First compiled in the 16th century, it catalogued thousands of works deemed threatening to the faith or moral order. Scientists, poets, philosophers, some were banned for challenging the accepted cosmos, others for questioning the divine hierarchy. Giordano Bruno burned at the stake for his cosmic visions. Galileo Galilei silenced for peering too boldly at the heavens. Their names etched into history's ledger of lost voices, yet the question lingers softly in the night. How many other voices were extinguished, never to echo again? Beneath the quiet walls of the Vatican, rumors persist of secret archives vaults where banned books survive in shadow, shielded from the world. Text on forbidden doctrines, alternative gospels, esoteric wisdom from lands far beyond Rome's reach. Some manuscripts hint at early Christian sects, whose beliefs diverged sharply from orthodox teachings. Gnostic gospels speak of secret knowledge, a divine spark within each soul, hidden truths that threatened to unravel church authority. Were these books lost by accident or design? In the Middle Ages, the Church's quest to preserve orthodoxy often meant burning heresy at the stake and burning heretical texts alike. But fire is not an absolute eraser. Some fragments survived, smuggled by faithful believers, copied in secret, hidden in monasteries or beneath the floors of humble homes. The act of burning was as much a battle over minds as over bodies, an effort to shape reality itself, to decide what could be thought, what could be imagined, and what must remain forever out of reach. Yet knowledge has a quiet resilience. Even when books are burned, ideas take flight on the lips of whisperers, on the pages of underground manuscripts, on the stained fingers of secret keepers. The Vatican's relationship with these forbidden books is complex, a dance of fear, respect, and necessity. Some texts have been slowly reintroduced over centuries, carefully edited or reinterpreted to fit the evolving faith. Others remain locked away, their power too dangerous, their truths too unsettling. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, imagine those hidden shelves, rows of manuscripts wrapped in silk and shadow, pages that once bore the fire's kiss but survived silent sentinels of forgotten thought. They remind us that history is not just what is recorded, but also what is erased, that the quiet spaces between known truths are filled with stories, yearning to be told. And in the soft silence of your dreams, may you wander those forgotten halls, listening, always listening, to the whispered voices of forbidden books. Beneath the quiet stones of Vatican City lies a world hidden from sunlight and common gaze, a labyrinth of shelves and shadows, where time seems to pause and breathe softly. This is the Vatican secret. Archives, a vault of mysteries, sacred scrolls, and untold stories. Though named secret, the archives are not a place of conspiracy alone, but a sanctuary of preservation. Here the whispers of centuries rest in silent accord, awaiting patient hands to unlock their riddles. Yet many wonder, what secrets does this immense library truly hold? What truths are folded between these ancient pages, guarded by silence and shadow? The archives stretch for miles beneath the Vatican's heart, a treasure trove of over 50 miles of shelving, filled with documents dating back over 12 centuries. From papal correspondence to treaties, censuses, and letters penned by kings and queens, the collection is staggering in its scope and importance. But beyond the mundane, there lie texts so rare and cryptic that they ignite the imagination. Documents sealed for centuries, only accessible to the most trusted scholars, hint at knowledge too powerful or unsettling for the wider world. One such document, often whispered about but rarely seen, is the letter of Jesus to King Abgar An. Ancient correspondence said to reveal early Christian miracles. Fragments of early Gnostic manuscripts removed from public view to protect orthodoxy. Medieval diaries recounting strange visions and political intrigues at the heart of the papacy. Each artifact is a puzzle piece in a sprawling mosaic of faith, power, and human frailty. Access to these archives is tightly controlled and trusted, only to select scholars and clergy. It is said that the conditions for studying here are austere patience and silence the only companions. The air is thick with dust and reverence, as if even the walls hold their breath. Such secrecy has given birth to countless rumors, hidden prophecies, banned scientific treatises, coded messages, and forbidden knowledge that could shake the foundations of belief. Yet behind these stories there is a deeper truth. The archives exist not only to conceal but to preserve, to hold history gently, even when it is inconvenient or dangerous. The Vatican's secret archives have faced threats, fires, floods, wars, but remain steadfast, a testament to the resilience of human curiosity and devotion. They embody the paradox of the Church itself, a guardian of faith and a keeper of shadows. Perhaps the greatest secret of the archives is that they reflect humanity's eternal struggle between what is known and what is hidden, between faith and doubt, between silence and revelation. As you drift into sleep, picture yourself walking softly down endless corridors of books and scrolls. Feel the cool stone beneath your fingers, the scent of ancient ink and parchment. Hear the faint rustle of pages turning as the past unfolds quietly before you. In this silent sanctuary, the secrets of centuries wait patiently, waiting to be heard, to be understood, to be gently released into the world. May this quiet reverence accompany your dreams, and may the mysteries held here inspire a peaceful journey into the night. Among the countless scrolls and parchments lost and found, one text stands apart, a gospel not of saints or saviors, but of a man often cast as the eternal betrayer. Judas Iscariot, the name spoken in hushed tones, painted as the shadow that darkened Christ's path. Yet this gospel, hidden for centuries, offers a different story, one that gently unfolds a whisper of betrayal turned paradox, of loyalty misunderstood, and secrets kept in silence. Tonight, we turn the fragile pages of the forbidden gospel of Judas and listen closely to a narrative that invites us to question what we think we know. Discovered in the 1970s in a sun-baked Egyptian cave, this ancient manuscript stunned scholars and believers alike. Written in Coptic, dating back to the 3rd or 4th century, it depicts Judas not as a villain, but as the disciple closest to Christ's true teachings. In this gospel, Judas is the one who understood the mysteries that others could not, the one who followed divine instruction to enable a sacred sacrifice. It paints a portrait of a cosmic plan where betrayal becomes a necessary step in salvation's unfolding. This radical reimagining challenges centuries of doctrine. It suggests that Judas's act was not treachery, but obedience to a higher will, a painful, lonely role entrusted to him by Christ himself. For some, this gospel is a revelation. For others, a heresy to be hidden away. The Church for centuries has remained silent on this text, its contents kept from the faithful. Buried beneath layers of official narrative, the Gospel of Judas speaks in symbols and enigmatic phrases. It hints at secret knowledge no intended, for those prepared to see beyond surface truths. It invites us to reconsider the nature of good and evil, of loyalty and sacrifice. As we trace its meaning softly, we find ourselves invited into a mystery larger than simple betrayal. It is a meditation on human frailty, divine purpose, and the shadows between. This gospel reminds us that history is not merely a record of facts, but a living conversation between past and present, truth and belief. It challenges us to look beyond black and white, to embrace complexity, and to find compassion even in the darkest of stories. And perhaps, as you rest now, the story of Judas becomes not a tale of condemnation, but a quiet echo of courage, the courage to bear burdens unseen, to walk a path shadowed yet necessary, and to hold a truth too heavy for others to carry. So as your eyes grow heavy, let this gentle retelling lull you toward dreams where truth wears many masks, where stories once forbidden softly unfold like petals in the night, and where understanding blooms quietly in the stillness between. Heartbeats. Some truths do not arrive like thunder. They do not shout. They simply appear, steady, bright, and inevitable, like the rising of a distant star. One such truth emerged from the lens of a humble telescope in the hands of a quiet man named Galileo Galilei. He gazed into the night and saw what others could not: moons circling Jupiter, stars unseen by the naked eye, a sunspot drifting across divine perfection. What he saw was not rebellion. It was revelation, but sometimes a revelation threatens not only ignorance, but power. In the early 1600s, the world still stood in the comforting center of its own story. The Church, following the ancient geocentric teachings of Ptolemy and Aristotle, proclaimed earth the immovable heart of God's creation. The heavens, perfect and eternal, turned around it, an order as firm as Scripture and as still as stone. Then Galileo looked through glass and drew a different map. He read the stars not with faith alone, but with reason, a new kind of reverence. What he saw aligned with the theory of Nicolaus Copernicus, a man who had dared decades earlier to suggest the earth moved through space, spinning, circling. Humboldt. The heliocentric model, the sun at the center, was heresy not just in physics, but in philosophy, theology, and tradition. Galileo did not just rearrange the stars. He disturbed the balance of heaven and earth. At first, he was admired. His discoveries were met with wonder. He dined with cardinals. He spoke with popes. His fame grew. His writings spread. But slowly unease settled over the Vatican like a gathering cloud. It wasn't that Galileo's science was weak. It was that his science was too strong, too compelling, too elegant, too confident. He did not whisper. He declared, and power does not often forgive declaration. In 1616, the Church issued a quiet warning. Galileo was told not to defend Copernican theory as truth, only as hypothesis. He obeyed, outwardly for a time, but silence was not in his nature. And truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. In 1632, he published Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, a masterwork written as a conversation between three voices, one open-minded, one cautious, and one foolish. It was not hard to see who represented the Church, and it was not flattering. The response was swift. In 1633, Galileo was summoned to Rome, not as a guest, as a defendant. The Inquisition, the Church's tribunal of theological purity, placed him on trial for heresy. He was 69 years old. His hands shook, but his mind, still full of stars, did not. The trial was short, the judgment predetermined. Under threat of torture and exile, Galileo recanted his beliefs. He was forced to kneel and deny the motion of the earth, forced to speak against what he knew to be true. And yet it moves. He may have whispered it, or perhaps it was added by later poets. But truth, once spoken, never fully disappears. Galileo spent the rest of his life under house arrest. He was forbidden to teach, to publish, to speak, but in silence he wrote. He turned his gaze from the heavens to the laws of motion, to falling bodies, to the whispers of physics. And even as his body weakened, his mind illuminated new paths for future minds to walk. For centuries, the Vatican held firm to its decision. Only in 1992, nearly 350 years later, did Pope John Paul II formally acknowledge the Church's error. He called Galileo's trial a tragic mutual incomprehension, a gentle phrase cloaking a heavy truth. But the shadows of that silence still lingered. The Vatican, protector of eternal truths, once feared a man who saw deeper into creation than they were ready to admit. And in doing so, it imprisoned not only Galileo, but the Church's own relationship with the stars. This story is not one of villainy. It is a story of fear, of tradition grappling with transformation, of an institution built on certainty. Confronted by the infinite, Galileo did not curse the Church. He loved it. He believed that science and faith could speak together like two hands of the same divine mind. But the Church, for a time, could not hear him. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine that telescope, a slender tube of wood and glass pointed skyward beneath the Tuscan sky. Imagine the man who looked through it, not to challenge God, but to understand him more clearly. And as you drift toward sleep, let that soft vision stay with you. The stars turning quietly, whether we believe in them or not. The earth spinning gently under your bed, and the whisper of truth waiting patiently to be seen again. There are few things more powerful than a book, not because of the paper or ink, but because of the fire it can light in a curious mind. But what happens when that fire is seen as dangerous? When words become weapons and pages are deemed too sharp for the soul? In the corridors of the Church, where silence and sanctity once walked hand in hand, a list was born. Not a list of saints nor of sinners, but of books not to be. Read, not to be trusted, not to be known. Its name would be whispered for centuries. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum. The Index of Forbidden Books. It began in the 16th century, as the Protestant Reformation shook the foundation of Catholic Europe. Voices rose across the continent, voices of dissent, of inquiry, of reimagined theology. The printing press, barely a century old, spread these ideas like wildfire. For the Church, this was not merely a theological crisis. It was an unraveling of order, a loosening of the tightly woven garment of doctrine. Something had to be done. Not with swords, but with silence. In 1559, under Pope Paul IV, the first official Index Librorum Prohibitorum was published. It was more than a catalogue, it was a proclamation. Here are the thoughts you must not think. Here are the truths you must not touch. Among its pages were the names of philosophers, poets, scientists, theologians: Martin Luther, John Calvin, later Galileo, Descartes, Rousseau, Pascal, Voltaire. Even the mystical works of Teresa of Avila, now a saint, were briefly placed under suspicion. No genre was spared. Books on astronomy, politics, medicine, art, and theology were all marked with the same scarlet thread: do not read. The logic was simple: to protect the faithful from confusion, to guard against heresy. to maintain unity in a time of chaos. But over time, something deeper took root, the belief that knowledge itself might be dangerous, that not all truths were safe for the human heart. The Church did not always destroy these books. Many were hidden, instead locked away in monasteries and seminaries. Some were read in secret by inquisitors or scholars tasked with understanding the enemy's words. But for the common soul, the rule was clear. If it is on the index, it is not meant for your eyes. And yet, eyes wandered. Curiosity, like water, finds its way through even the smallest cracks. Some smuggled books under robes and within false bindings. Some copied them by hand, preserving banned ideas in careful script. In quiet rooms lit by candlelight, readers turned forbidden pages with trembling hands, not to rebel, but to understand. To question is not always to defy. Sometimes it is. Simply to seek. The index evolved over the years. New books were added, others removed. The criteria shifted with popes and with the pulse of history. By the 19th century, it included thousands of titles, and yet the world had changed. Revolutions had come. Empires had fallen. Science and philosophy had carved new spaces in the human mind, and the power to forbid books began to feel heavy, outdated, out of step with the modern soul. In 1966, over 4 centuries after its creation, the Index was officially abolished by Pope Paul VI. Not with fire, but with a soft, almost quiet farewell. It was no longer deemed necessary. The Church would guide, not forbid, counsel, not censor. It was a moment of quiet evolution, one that marked the end of an era where knowledge lived under lock and key. And yet, the ghost of the Index remains. Not as a list, but as a question that still lives in every generation. Should there be limits to what we read? Can truth be dangerous? Can an idea wound more deeply than a sword? These are not questions with simple answers, and perhaps they are not meant to be answered, only to be considered gently, respectfully, as one considers a candle in the wind. So, tonight, picture a quiet room in the 17th century. A monk reaches beneath a floorboard, his hand trembling, as he draws out a leather-bound book with no title. He opens it not to challenge his faith, but to deepen it, to understand the world in all its light and shadow. Now picture yourself floating into sleep, surrounded by books both allowed and forbidden, and knowing that within you lives the same sacred fire, the longing to know, to wonder, and to walk. Ever so softly into the pages of the unknown. In the echoing chambers of history, some names pass like thunder, others like whispers. And then there are those that drift somewhere in between, their legacy wrapped in silence, their influence vast yet hidden. Such is the mystery of the Society of Jesus, more simply known as the Jesuits. Warriors of faith, scholars of impossible depth, confessors to kings, guardians of secrets the world may never fully understand. Tonight, we step gently behind the veil of this most enigmatic order, where silence is a vow and knowledge is a form of devotion. Founded in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, the Jesuit order emerged during a time of upheaval. The Protestant Reformation had cracked open the Church. Wars of faith scorched Europe, and new worlds were being discovered. each one pulsing with spiritual and political urgency. The Jesuits were not monks behind monastery walls. They were men of motion, missionaries, scientists, educators, diplomats. They traversed continents and empires, planting schools, advising emperors, mastering languages, and mapping the heavens and the earth. Their intellect was unmatched, their discipline near total, but it was their secrecy, soft, deliberate, and unshakable, that carved them into legend. They were called the Pope's soldiers, not with swords, but with ideas. Their loyalty was to Rome, yet their reach often exceeded it. In the courts of China, they wore silk robes, converting emperors through astronomy and philosophy. In the Americas, they translated scripture into tribal tongues, teaching Christ through stories that danced between cultures. And in Europe, they advised kings, influenced policy, and some say pulled strings behind velvet drapes. The Vatican trusted them and sometimes feared them, for though they swore obedience to the Pope, their order operated with unusual autonomy. Their inner workings, their archives, their allegiances, all cloaked in discretion. This mystery bred rumors. They possessed ancient knowledge unearthed in the East, that they hid gospels too radical for the world, that they maintained a second library within the Vatican, a veiled vault of esoteric wisdom and forbidden truth. Even today, scholars debate what lies within Jesuit records, locked in Rome, or scattered in hidden houses across the globe. The Jesuits walked the line between revelation and restraint. They believed in reason, in science, mathematics, and language. But they also believed that not all knowledge should be shared. In whispered corners, stories spread of documents recovered from lost cities, of dialogues with mystics and sages from Persia, India, Ethiopia, worldviews that might have reshaped the Western Church had they been released too soon. Or at all. Did the Jesuits bury these truths to protect the Church, or to protect the world from truths it was not ready to hold? In 1773, the balance broke. Under pressure from kings and clergy alike, Pope Clement XIV issued a decree that dissolved the Society of Jesus. Their power had grown too vast, their network too wide, their loyalty perhaps too complex. The order vanished almost overnight. Their schools shut down, their missions abandoned, their archives sealed. But shadows do not disappear so easily. Even in absence, their name lingered like incense. In a darkened chapel. In 1814, the Jesuits were restored. Their return quiet, cautious, and uncelebrated. But once again, they began to rebuild schools, missions, libraries of thought, this time with more subtlety, more restraint. Yet their legend only grew. Some claimed they had a secret leader, Black Pope, not for his robe, but for the quiet power he held beside the white-robed pontiff, a strategist in the shadows, a second center of gravity within the Vatican. Fact or fiction, the title remains, an echo of power dressed in discretion. Today, the Jesuits remain the Church's intellectual heart. They train minds, translate texts, and stand quietly in times of change. One of their own, Pope Francis, now sits on the throne of St. Peter, the first Jesuit pope in history. But the veil has not lifted. Not entirely. Their archives remain largely closed, their decisions rarely explained, their true role in Vatican history obscured by reverence and perhaps by design. So as you lay quietly now, Imagine an old Jesuit library, its wood dark with centuries of silence, its walls lined with manuscripts in languages you've never seen. A place where faith and science meet in the middle, where belief is not blind, but studied, questioned, and refined. And beyond the shelves, behind a door, few have opened the deeper truths. The story's not yet ready to be told. Let your thoughts wander there now, not to solve the mystery, but simply to feel its weight, its wonder, and the peace that comes from knowing that even in shadows there can be meaning. In the hills of Portugal, beneath a sky pale with spring light, 3 children tended sheep in the quiet town of Fatima. It was the year 1917, a world gripped by war, by fear, by silence. But in this still corner of the earth, something stirred, something divine, or something profoundly misunderstood. What began as a vision of light would soon ripple across nations. The church would take notice, the faithful would gather, and eventually a prophecy wrapped in secrecy and silence would be locked behind Vatican walls. Tonight, we open that silence softly. Their names were Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, simple children from a humble family. They were not scholars, not prophets, but the story they would tell would become one of the most mysterious and contested in modern Catholic history. On May 13th, 1917, as they watched their flock near the Cova de Iria, they claimed to have seen a woman brighter than the sun, shimmering above a small oak tree. She did not speak at first, but over the course of 6 apparitions, she would reveal more messages, warnings, visions. The figure would come to be known as Our Lady of Fatima. She told them to pray, to sacrifice, to turn the hearts of men back to God. But it was what she revealed on the 3rd visit that would change everything. She entrusted the children with 3 secrets, visions too heavy for their young shoulders, too strange for a world already wounded by war. The children were told not to speak of them yet, and so they didn't, not until much later. The first secret was a vision of hell, a sea of fire, demons, and lost souls. Lucia would later describe it in trembling detail. The second was a prophecy that the Great War would soon end, but that another, far worse, would come if the world did not repent. It also spoke of Russia and a plea for its consecration. To the Immaculate Heart of Mary, if ignored, the vision said, Russia would spread its errors throughout the world. The third secret, however, was written down and sealed. It was sent to the Vatican in 1944 and kept unopened until the year 2000, more than half a century of waiting, of speculation, of mystery wrapped in sacred discretion. Why did it remain locked away? What did the third secret say? And perhaps more hauntingly, was the public ever told the full truth? When the Vatican finally released the third secret in June of 2000, it contained a symbolic vision. It spoke of a bishop dressed in white, climbing a mountain, surrounded by ruins and corpses, only to be shot and killed alongside other clergy. The Church interpreted it as a prophecy of the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II in 1981. He had been struck by gunfire on May 13th, the exact date of the first apparition in Fatima. The symbolism was powerful. The interpretation, perhaps too neat, but many scholars and even some of Lucia's surviving notes hint at something more, that the real third secret spoke not just of martyrdom, but of a great apostasy, a loss of faith within the very heart of the Church, of corruption, collapse, confusion from within. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, once hinted at this. He spoke of a destabilization of the faith, a spiritual crisis, not just a physical one. Was the true message spiritual and symbolic, or a dire warning of darkness, rising inside the very walls meant to guard the light? Others believe the secret remains only partially revealed, that what we were shown in 2000 was the safer version, the softer edge of a prophecy too raw to confront. Could a message from heaven speak of division among clergy, of a coming schism, of wolves in shepherd's clothing? If such a message had been given to the Church in the early 20th century, perhaps they felt it best to protect the faithful from fear, or perhaps they feared its implications more than they feared truth itself. Lucia, the last surviving child, became a cloistered nun. She remained silent for most of her life, speaking only when asked by popes and bishops. In her later letters, she hinted at sorrow that her words had not been fully understood or fully told. She died in 2005, carrying with her, perhaps, the full depth of the vision she once saw as a child beneath a Portuguese sky. The Vatican holds that all has been revealed, that no secret remains, but even among the faithful, a quiet sense of something withheld remains, not out of malice, but out of fear, or protection, or the deep, complex difficulty of interpreting visions wrapped in metaphor and mystery. So what was the lost prophecy of Fatima? A warning, a call to prayer, a glimpse of a future yet to come, or simply the dream of children, shaped by the world? They knew, we may never know, but the power of the story is not in certainty, it is in the question itself. Now, as your breath slows and your eyes grow heavy, imagine that little field in Fatima, the breeze soft through the trees, 3 children, standing in sunlight and silence, watching the sky, hearing something the world could not. And as sleep finds you, let the mystery remain just that, unanswered, undisturbed, like a letter from heaven still sealed, resting softly in the quiet hands of time. In the vast halls of the Vatican, where silence often holds more weight than words, there was once a man who carried a secret heavy, enough to shake the foundations of faith itself. He was a pope not unlike those before him, humble, devout, yet quietly determined. But unlike others, he longed to speak openly, to unravel shadows, to share a truth that had been whispered for centuries, and yet was still locked behind sacred doors. This is the story of the Pope who tried to tell. His name was Pope John the 23rd, elected in 1958, a man known for warmth, humor, and a pastoral heart. He shocked the world when, just months into his papacy, he convened the Second Vatican Council, a sweeping effort to open the Church's windows to the modern world. Behind this call for renewal lay a deeper, quieter mission. He wished to shine light on the hidden truths buried in the Church's shadowed past, to confront secrets too long kept in silence. John the 23rd had seen the world change, wars, Holocaust, atomic threat, and believed the Church must change too, or risk becoming a relic, forgotten and irrelevant. But his vision extended beyond reforms of liturgy and doctrine. He had whispers, hints of truths long concealed. He spoke cautiously to trusted confidants of documents he wished to release. of truths locked away in Vatican archives, truths about politics, power, and perhaps errors of past popes. Yet the weight of history and the gravity of tradition kept many locked in hesitation. The Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965, became a beacon of hope for openness, a promise to dialogue with the modern world, to listen to new voices, and to embrace peace and reconciliation. Yet, even as Council Fathers gathered, some doors stayed firmly closed, and John the 23rd's deepest hopes to reveal Vatican's shadows remained just out of reach. He died suddenly in 1963, before he could fully act on his intentions. His passing left the Church grieving, but also wondering what might have been. Some say his death was natural, a heart overwhelmed by the burdens of leadership. Others whisper more quietly that there were those within the Vatican who feared the light he tried to shine. His successor, Pope Paul VI, continued some reforms, but was more cautious, more bound by tradition. The secrets remained sealed. The shadows lingered. Yet John the 23rd's dream endured, a call for honesty, transparency, and courage. In private letters, John the 23rd confided, "The truth is a lamp that shines in darkness, but the darkness is afraid of light." He understood the delicate balance, how revelation could heal and how it could fracture, and so he moved with care, trying to prepare a church both ready and wary of change. Many years later, historians would piece together his vision. They would see him as a bridge between an old world of silence and a new one of dialogue, a gentle voice whispering across time, urging the Church to step beyond fear and into truth. Tonight, imagine yourself in that quiet Vatican room where a weary but hopeful Pope pores over ancient scrolls. His fingers trace faded words, his heart heavy with the knowledge that some truths may never be fully revealed. But still, he hopes. He hopes for a church that can face its shadows, and for a world that can forgive and understand. As sleep gently pulls you deeper, let this be a reminder that even in silence there is courage, and even in shadows there is a quiet light waiting to be seen. There are chapters in every life that slip quietly from the record, moments lived but not written, felt but not told. And in the greatest story ever told, there is a silence, a soft, deliberate silence stretching across nearly 2 decades. From the age of 12 until the age of 30, the life of Jesus of Nazareth disappears from the Gospels, as if the pages were never written, or perhaps carefully removed. This silence has stirred centuries of wonder. Where did he go? What did he learn? Why does the Bible leave those years in shadow? Tonight we walk gently into that silence, not to disturb it, but to listen for what it might still hold. In the Gospel of Luke, we find a young Jesus, 12 years old, speaking with scribes in the temple, astonishing the elders with his wisdom. Then, silence. He does not reappear in the text until he emerges 30 years old, along the banks of the Jordan River to be baptized by John. No account is given of the years between. No travels, no teachings, no miracles. Only the soft turning of time. For the faithful, this may be a divine mystery, a sacred period of preparation, hidden by design. But for seekers, for scholars, for wanderers of forgotten truth, the question opens a door. Where was Jesus during those years? And here the stories begin to rise, not from canon, but from legend, rumor, and fragments of ancient text hidden in desert sands and monastery walls. Some say he remained in Nazareth, living quietly as a carpenter, working beside Joseph, watching, waiting, listening. A life simple, anonymous, and holy in its humility. Others suggest he left Galilee altogether, that he walked the trade routes of the Silk Road, crossed deserts and mountains, and found his way to distant lands in India. Local traditions speak of a holy man who arrived from the West, a teacher who preached compassion, performed healings, and studied among Brahmins and Buddhists in the mountains of Tibet. Some claim there are scrolls kept in monastic archives that tell of a prophet from Judea who sought wisdom there, and in the arid sands of Egypt. Ancient Coptic writings hint that Jesus may have studied with the desert mystics, absorbing forgotten teachings lost in time. Could he have been a student of many traditions? A seeker before becoming a teacher? A young man gathering the threads of global wisdom to weave into the gospel he would one day share? These stories, though unconfirmed, are not easily dismissed. They live in the quiet corners of history, preserved in oral traditions, in fragments found and disputed, in manuscripts once labeled heretical, too radical, perhaps, for the early church to embrace. And here, once again, the Vatican enters the story. The secret archives are said to hold references, scrolls recovered by early missionaries, letters written by travelers, even reports of monks who traced these tales across Asia and the Middle East. Documents that might suggest a broader life than the Gospels reveal. But the doors to these materials remain closed, and the silence continues. To some, this silence is respectful. To others, it is protective, a way to preserve a narrative long cherished. But perhaps it is also something simpler, a recognition that not all truths come through pages. Some arrive as quiet possibilities, meant not to be proven, but to be pondered. What if the missing years of Jesus are not a void, but a mirror? A space left open for each heart to imagine, each soul to wander. What would you do in those years between childhood and calling? Would you travel? Would you seek? Would you sit beneath trees and ask questions too large for words? As your breath slows and the weight of the day begins to lift, let yourself walk that road with him, a young man unknown, feet dusty from travel, eyes open to the vastness of the world. He watches the sunrise from the hills, listens to prayers in foreign tongues, gathers wisdom not to keep, but to give, and when the time comes, he returns not as a boy, but as a teacher, ready to speak of love, of justice, of a kingdom not built with stone. Let that silence cradle you now, not as absence, but as invitation. For in the missing years of Jesus, we find not a loss, but a sacred space where wonder waits. Some stories are told with bright clarity. Others drift in mist, half seen and half imagined. And then there are the stories that are not told at all, not because they are forgotten, but because they were never written down in the sacred scriptures of Christianity. Jesus of Nazareth steps onto the stage of history as an infant in Bethlehem, and then again, briefly, as a boy of 12 teaching in the temple, surprising the elders with his wisdom. And then, for nearly 2 decades, he disappears. No Gospels, no details, no miracles, no voice. Just silence. From age 12 to 30, the man who would change the world vanishes into time. This silence, known to scholars as the hidden years, is one of the most intriguing omissions in all of Scripture. Where did he go? What did he learn? Why do the Gospels not tell? The official explanation is simple. Jesus lived quietly in Nazareth, a carpenter's son, waiting for his time to come. But others, mystics, historians, seekers, have long wondered if the truth is far more mysterious across distant lands and forgotten manuscripts. There are whispers, fragments of stories that suggest Jesus may have wandered far from Galilee in search of wisdom, in pursuit of something older than time. In India, legends speak of a prophet from the West, a holy man who walked among the Brahmins, learning the language of the soul from sages who had studied for centuries. Some say he meditated in Himalayan caves. Others claim he debated with priests, preaching love and humility long before it echoed from the hills of Judea. In Tibet, scrolls preserved in the cool silence of remote monasteries tell of a visitor from a foreign land, a teacher who spoke of oneness, who healed with a touch, who honored both heaven and earth. And in Egypt, among the early desert mystics, some believe Jesus may have studied ancient rites, the mysteries of rebirth, of sacred geometry, the silent codes passed from priest to priest in temples already older than memory. These stories are not part of canon. They were never accepted by the early church. Perhaps they were too speculative, or too dangerous to the tightly woven tapestry of doctrine. The Vatican itself holds fragments, letters, apocryphal gospels, journals of missionaries who claimed to have found echoes of Jesus in distant places. But these are kept deep in the secrecy, archives buried not just by stone, but by centuries of theological caution. Some truths, it seems, are left undisturbed not because they are false, but because they are untold. Why then would the Gospels remain silent? Perhaps because those years were meant to be hidden, a sacred cocoon before the metamorphosis. Or perhaps the early church feared that a wandering Jesus would make him too human. In the Vatican, where marble speaks and candles never truly die, power is not always worn in gold. Sometimes it moves in silence, sometimes it wears black, and sometimes the real throne is the one you cannot see. For centuries, the Catholic Church has had one visible leader, the Pope in white, the Bishop of Rome, the Vicar of Christ on earth. But within the hidden folds of the Church's hierarchy, another title has sparked whispers, theories, and questions too delicate to ask aloud. The Black Pope. The name is not born of shadow, nor of darkness in the moral sense. It comes simply from the color of the robes. The superior general of the Society of Jesus, known as the Jesuits, has traditionally worn black, and with it carried an authority that is vast, global, and largely invisible to the public eye. He is often seen as the quiet strategist behind the scenes, a spiritual general whose influence reaches across continents, through universities, missions, intelligence circles, and theological councils. To some, he is a loyal servant of the Church. To others, he is the real power behind the papal throne. The Jesuit order was founded in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, a soldier-turned-saint who envisioned a disciplined, intellectually fierce brotherhood dedicated to the Pope and to spreading the gospel with both gentleness and precision. Over time, the Jesuits became missionaries, educators, scientists, and confessors to kings. But with their reach came something else, an unparalleled network of knowledge, spanning empires, navigating politics, and accessing the minds of rulers. The superior general, Batu, elected for life, stood at the center of this vast web. He commanded not armies, but minds. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the Jesuits had become so powerful, so deeply embedded in world affairs, that kings began to fear them. Their influence on education, policy, and religious doctrine was immense. They were expelled from Portugal, then from France, then from Spain and Naples. And in 1773, under immense political pressure, Pope Clement XIV officially suppressed the Jesuit order. But some say he did so with fear in his eyes, not because he believed they had failed the faith, but because their power had grown too independent. Even for Rome, the order was quietly restored in 1814, and with it returned the hidden structure, the silent command chain, and the man called the Black Pope. To the public, this title is unofficial and formal, dramatic, and often sensationalized. But to those who study Vatican diplomacy, there is something undeniably potent about the role of the superior general. He is not a cardinal. He holds no seat in St. Peter's Basilica, but he advises popes, influences councils, shapes thought. He leads thousands of Jesuits across more than 100 countries, a global network, discreet, devout, and strategic. So what does it mean, this idea of a double throne? Is there tension between the visible Pope in white and the unseen Pope in black? Are they allies balancing theology and action? Or rivals balancing loyalty and interpretation? And when a Jesuit was elected Pope Francis, in 2013, for the first time in history, the two roles merged. The Black Pope became the white. For some, it was a hopeful union. For others, a final consolidation of a quiet power centuries in the making. Yet beneath the surface of admiration lies a current of unease. There are those who believe the Jesuits hold secrets deeper than doctrine, that they have knowledge gleaned from their missions, archives that stretch beyond the Vatican's own, an intelligence built from centuries of scholarly infiltration. They are the only order in the Church with such autonomy and with such reach, and so the legend grows that the Black Pope is not merely a religious figure, but a shadow sovereign. Some conspiracy theories go further still, suggesting that the Jesuits orchestrate global events, that they possess forbidden texts, that they are the architects of a new theological age. These stories are dramatic, often exaggerated, but, like all legends, they bloom from seeds of truth. The real story perhaps is more subtle. It is about the balance of visible power and intellectual influence, of ritual and strategy, of the voice on the balcony, and the whisper in the hall. It is about a church that has always needed both, a face to bless the world and a mind to shape its future. And what, then, do we make of the double throne? Perhaps it is not two thrones at all. Perhaps it is one seat, shared by tradition and thought, by prayer and precision, by heart and by mind. The Pope blesses, the Jesuit watches, and together they guide a church that stands between earth and heaven. Tonight, as the world fades to quiet, imagine a long corridor in the Vatican, its lamps glowing gold, its doors closed, its halls echoing with footsteps that leave no sound. In one chamber, a man in white writes a message of peace. In another, a man in black studies a map of the world's soul. They do not speak. They do not need to. For between them lies a bond older than titles, a mission shared in silence. And as you drift into sleep, know that even in the heart of mystery, there may be harmony, not in conquest, but in balance. Two thrones, one church, and the quiet, steady turning of the world. In the darkest century of modern memory, when tanks rolled like thunder and skies were lit with fire, the world searched for voices of clarity, for faith, for truth, for a moral compass strong enough to face the storm. And in the heart of Rome, behind ancient walls, the Vatican stood, its bells still ringing, its prayers still rising, as millions across Europe trembled in fear. The Second World War brought questions deeper than politics. It brought the soul of humanity to a breaking point, and in that breaking, many turned their eyes to the Church. Would it speak? Would it act? Or would it remain silent? At the time, the Church was led by Pope Pius XII, a man of intellect and diplomacy, steeped in tradition and shaped by the trauma of the First World War. He ascended to the papacy in 1939, just as Hitler's forces prepared to plunge the world into chaos. To some, Pius XII was the right man for such a moment, measured, calm, politically shrewd. To others, he was too cautious, too diplomatic, too reluctant to condemn the rising tide of evil. And it is in this delicate tension between preservation and proclamation that our quiet mystery begins. The Vatican had long held neutrality as a sacred policy. It did not take sides in wars. It offered diplomacy, prayer, and mediation. But what happens when neutrality meets genocide? When silence, however well-intended, is heard as indifference? The Holocaust claimed the lives of over 6 million Jews. Entire communities vanished, and as trains rolled toward death camps, the world looked to the Vatican, to its moral voice, its immense influence. Pope Pius XII spoke of peace. He denounced violence in broad, veiled terms, but he never named Hitler. He never condemned the Nazis by name. He never directly referenced the Jews during the war years, and so a question has lingered for generations. Why? Defenders of Pius XII argue that he worked in secret, that he helped orchestrate rescue operations behind the scenes. Indeed, Catholic institutions across Europe, monasteries, convents, even the Vatican itself, hid Jews, smuggled them, protected them with forged baptismal certificates. Estimates suggest the Church saved hundreds of thousands of lives in this way. Quiet, courageous acts carried out in defiance of Nazi orders. But critics ask, why not speak louder? Why not use the pulpit of St. Peter to denounce evil in clear terms? Was it fear? Was it politics? Or was it something even deeper, a belief that secrecy and strategy would do more than confrontation? After the war, Pius XII was praised by many world leaders, including Jewish figures. But as time passed and documents emerged, the silence became harder to defend. In the 1960s, the play The Deputy portrayed Pius as morally complicit, a cold, calculating pontiff who refused to risk the Church's power. This sparked a storm of debate that has never fully subsided. At the center of it all lies the Vatican archives, sealed for decades, holding thousands of pages of letters, transcripts, and internal memos that could reveal what the Vatican knew. And when it knew it, in March 2020, Pope Francis ordered the opening of the World War II-era archives, a decision that many historians hailed as brave and overdue. Since then, researchers have begun to unearth a more complex picture. Pius XII did know of the mass extermination of Jews earlier than he publicly admitted. He was warned by bishops, diplomats, and Jewish leaders. He chose silence perhaps out of fear of Nazi retaliation, perhaps to protect Catholics in occupied territories, perhaps because he believed diplomacy would do more good than condemnation. But with each document revealed, the question grows more haunting. Can silence be moral when lives are at stake? And yet, to view this chapter only in terms of guilt or innocence is to miss its quiet ache. The truth is not black and white. It is cloaked in ash dot. The Vatican walked a tightrope during the war, between moral clarity and political survival. It feared Nazi occupation. It feared that speaking out would lead to more death, not less. And so its silence, but as silence, heavy with cost, still there were lights in the darkness. Priests, nuns, and laypeople who defied orders to save lives. Church officials who forged documents, opened their doors, risked their lives. In Hungary, Slovakia, and Italy, these hidden heroes became the soul of a church that the world could not always see. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is that their courage was overshadowed by a silence that left the world wondering where the Vatican truly stood. As of now, Pope Pius XII's cause for sainthood remains controversial. Some call him the silent savior, others the Pope who never spoke. The truth, as always, lives between those extremes, complex, human, burdened. The Vatican still holds secrets, still guards documents, still weighs legacy against light. Tonight, as you rest beneath your own quiet sky, imagine a small desk in a Vatican study. A letter arrives, trembling with news of Auschwitz. The candlelight flickers, and a pope, alone in his thoughts, holds the fate of words that may save or condemn. Would you speak? Would you wait? Would you whisper to God in private and hope the world would hear? There is no easy ending to this chapter, no final judgment, only the soft hum of history still unfolding, and the reminder that silence, too, has weight, sometimes heavier than sound. As your eyes close, let that thought carry you into sleep, gently, respectfully, like a prayer unsaid, a letter unopened, a truth still waiting to be spoken. In the soft-lit halls of the Vatican, where saints are canonized and miracles affirmed, there is a role shrouded in quiet contradiction. A man once appointed not to defend the holy, but to doubt it. They called him the devil's advocate, not because he opposed faith, but because he was tasked with a sacred responsibility to question what others believed too quickly, to test the saints before the world lit their candles. It was his duty to protect the church not from evil, but from error. The official title was Promoter Fidei, Promoter of the Faith, and the role dates back to the late 1500s. Whenever a candidate for sainthood was proposed, this man stepped forward, not to praise the life in question, but to challenge. Was a person truly holy? Were their miracles authentic? Had they lived a life of virtue, or had time and myth softened inconvenient truths? The devil's advocate became the church's inner skeptic, a necessary guardian against the dangers of veneration built on legend. The position required a particular kind of brilliance, logical, precise, emotionally detached. he would pore over letters, testimonies, and life histories. He would question witnesses. He would raise doubts no one else dared to ask. What if this miracle was misunderstood? What if the person had flaws no one wanted to see? In doing so, he did not attack the holy, he purified it. If sainthood could withstand his examination, it was stronger for it. In the modern world, this may seem odd. Why would a church so devoted to reverence appoint someone to cast shadows over light? But the devil's advocate served a higher purpose, to remind us that even saints were human. That holiness, to be real, must be rooted in truth, not legend, not desire, but truth. His was not a role of cynicism. It was a role of humility. Throughout history, some canonizations took centuries, not because the Church did not love the candidate, but because the devil's advocate raised questions that needed time to answer. He resisted emotion. He rejected haste. He believed the sacred deserved the slow work of scrutiny. It is said that he helped preserve the dignity of sainthood by ensuring that no soul was lifted to the altar unless their life could endure the fire of doubt. Times changed. In 1983, under Pope John Paul II, the role of the devil's advocate was quietly restructured. The canonization process was simplified. Miracles were still investigated, but fewer voices opposed. Some rejoiced saints were recognized more quickly, their stories able to inspire in a world hungry for light, but others mourned. They feared the loss of that sacred caution, that soft, patient resistance that made the truth shine brighter. Without the devil's advocate, who would ask the hard questions? Who would protect the Church from its own eagerness to believe? Still today, whispers remain that the Church sometimes canonizes too swiftly, that miracles go unchallenged, that the absence of a formal skeptic leaves room for myth to walk in undetected. Some say the devil's advocate still exists. Unofficially, that certain cardinals and theologians now play the role informally, behind closed doors. And yet, the image of the man in black, seated quietly at the edge of the canonization table, holding a file of objections, remains a symbol of sacred tension, a reminder that even faith must be refined by fire. And perhaps, beyond the process, there is something deeply human in this role. We all carry questions. We all wrestle with doubt. And in our search for the divine, sometimes the most faithful thing we can do is to ask, but is it true? The devil's advocate reminds us that doubt is not the enemy of belief. It is part of its foundation, the weight that makes the bridge. Strong. Tonight, as you drift into quietness, imagine a silent chamber within the Vatican. A single candle flickers. A man sits alone with a life story before him, testimonies of grace and whispers of contradiction. He does not accuse. He listens. He asks. He stands not against the saints, but beside them, making sure that their light shines, not only brightly, but truthfully. And as you sleep, let this gentle lesson rest with you, that it is okay to ask questions, to examine what seems sacred, to wonder deeply. For even within the most ancient walls of faith, there has always been room for those who protect truth by challenging it softly, faithfully, with care. Behind the serene spires of St. Peter's, beneath the gilded ceilings and sacred statues, lies a place of whispered accounts and silent ledgers, a vault not of relics or prayer, but of currency, power, and shadow. The Vatican Bank, officially known as the Institute for the Works of Religion, was founded in 1942, a financial heart within the spiritual body of the Church. It was meant to safeguard church assets, support missions around the world, and act as a steward of sacred wealth. Yet, as history often reveals, money and mystery are intertwined in ways that quietly fracture trust. The bank's mission was pure, to serve the faith with prudence and care. But in the decades that followed, rumors gathered like dark clouds over the Vatican's financial horizon. Accounts frozen, funds diverted, secret investments, all woven into stories that felt as if they belonged more to a thriller than to a holy institution. The 1970s and 80s brought scandals that shook Rome. In 1982, the mysterious death of Roberto Calvi, known as God's banker, brought international attention to the Vatican Bank. Calvi was head of Banco Ambrosiano, a private bank deeply entangled with the Vatican Bank's finances. His body was found hanging beneath London's Blackfriars Bridge, money strapped to his body, a symbol heavy with meaning and unanswered questions. His death was officially ruled a suicide, but whispers insisted it was murder, a warning from shadowed corners where finance, crime, and faith collided. Calvi's scandal revealed the Vatican Bank's dangerous entanglements with organized crime, with political forces, and with secretive financial dealings that blurred ethical lines. It was a time when the bank was accused of laundering money, of protecting illicit gains, of acting as a haven for the world's dark money. The Church, a symbol of purity, was suddenly linked to the broken cross of corruption. Throughout these dark years, the Vatican maintained silence or offered carefully crafted statements. Yet the damage was undeniable. Faithful Catholics wrestled with the reality of their churches. Involvement in financial shadowlands. How could an institution built on spiritual wealth be tainted by earthly greed? The Vatican Bank became a symbol, not only of the Church's immense power, but of its vulnerability to human failings. Efforts to reform began in the 1990s and accelerated in the 2000s. Pope John Paul II and later Pope Benedict XVI sought greater transparency, but old habits die slowly. The bank's structure is unique, not beholden to ordinary financial regulations, answering only to the Pope himself. This autonomy allowed secrets to persist, while reformers fought quietly to clean the slate. In recent years, Pope Francis has taken a firm stance. He has called for greater accountability, for the Vatican to confront financial sins as rigorously as moral ones. His vision is clear: a church that does not only preach humility, but practices it, even in the ledgers of its bank. Yet questions remain. How deep did the corruption run? Who else was involved? And how much remains hidden behind the high walls and vaulted ceilings? The Vatican Bank and its scandals remind us of the fragile line between faith and fallibility, between sacred mission and worldly temptation. It is a story not just of money, but of trust, how it is built, broken, and can be rebuilt again. Tonight, as the world outside grows quiet, imagine the echoes of footsteps in an empty Vatican hallway, the soft rustle of papers, the faint click of a lock, the silent counting of coins that weigh heavier than gold. Beneath the cross and the altar, there lies a human story of ambition, weakness, and the hope for redemption. And as you close your eyes, let this thought settle gently. Even the holiest places contain shadows, and within those shadows There is always a chance for light dot in the quiet corners of the Vatican, where incense drifts like memory and corridors echo with centuries of footsteps. There are rooms not listed on any public tour. Behind thick doors and frosted windows, under lock, oath, and silence, the Church keeps another kind of record, a catalogue of darkness. These are the internal files, cases of possession, of spiritual warfare, of the strange and unexplainable. Documents not meant for theology books or museum displays, but for the eyes of a chosen few. And among these secrets, one practice weaves through the centuries like a thread of holy dread, exorcism. The word alone stirs the imagination. We picture it in dramatic flashes, dark rooms, ancient chants, twisting shadows. But within the Vatican's walls, exorcism is not spectacle. It is sacrament, and it is deadly serious. The Church has never taken it lightly. And so in its archives rest stories that were never told, not to hide them from fear, but perhaps to shield the faithful from deeper questions. Every diocese in the Catholic Church is permitted to appoint an exorcist, though few do. Those who receive the rite of exorcist are trained quietly, with great caution. They are not thrill-seekers, but often soft-spoken men of deep prayer, called not to confront evil directly, but to discern it from within. Their reports, when written, are sent to Rome, where they are logged, reviewed, and sometimes sealed away. These are not made public. Most will never be seen, but they exist, whispers on paper, signed, dated, filed. Some Vatican officials have acknowledged the sheer volume of such files, thousands of reports over centuries. Many are dismissed after investigation, explained by illness, trauma, or misdiagnosis. But some remain unresolved. Some bear witness to phenomena that defy explanation. Foreign languages spoken by the uneducated, knowledge of hidden things, visions of torment, strength beyond measure, and most haunting of all, voices that do not belong. Behind each case is a human life, fragile, frightened, and often isolated. The Church's response is never fast. Psychological evaluation is always the first step. But when medical science falls short and prayers of healing no longer suffice, a different ritual is considered. The rite of exorcism is one of the oldest in Christianity, an unbroken line from ancient times to the present. And though it has evolved, its purpose has not: to confront evil not through power, but through the sacred dot. In 1999, the Church revised the rite for the first time in centuries, modernizing the language while preserving its gravity. Still, it is rarely used, and always with permission from the bishop, sometimes even from Rome itself. Why such secrecy? Because the stakes are high, and the dangers, though often misunderstood, are not imagined. The Vatican has quietly advised caution. For centuries, not everything that appears demonic is. Not every cry in the dark is what it seems. And some spirits are more human than hellish. Yet the internal files tell us something profound. Not about devils, but about belief. About how deep human suffering can go, and how far the Church is willing to walk into that darkness with its faithful. They show a Church not simply preaching peace, but standing at the threshold of human torment with candle, prayer, and trembling conviction. Some say the Vatican holds far more than records, that proof of spiritual phenomena has been documented. Levitations, apparitions, battles waged in silence, Whether metaphor or miracle, truth or theology, these stories remain hidden not to deceive but to protect, because belief is delicate, and the line between faith and fear can be thinner than a whisper. Among the most mysterious cases are those linked to saints, holy men and women said to have battled darkness directly. Padre Pio, the Italian mystic priest, spoke often of being attacked by demons in the night. His wounds, his visions, his prophecies all recorded, reviewed, and partially archived by the Church. Some of those records remain sealed, not out of shame, but because not all experiences can be explained. Some are simply held with reverence and quiet awe. Tonight, as you lie in stillness, imagine one of those hidden rooms, a single desk, a warm leather-bound ledger. A priest sits in silence, reading a file that crackles with time. The words are careful, the tone calm, but beneath it all, a life once shaken by something unseen. He closes the file, offers a prayer, and places the record back in its drawer, not as proof of evil, but as a testament to endurance. The files may remain locked. The stories may never reach the pulpit, but they are real to those who live them, and they remind us that the Church, for all its mystery and grandeur, is also a place where the wounded are still brought to heal, even when the wound is unseen. As your breath slows and sleep begins to draw near, let this chapter rest with you, not in fear, but in reflection, that there are those who walk into the shadows, not to celebrate them, but to carry others back into the light. In the labyrinth of Vatican secrets, few figures evoke as much intrigue as Malachi Martin, a man cloaked in paradox. Both priest and outsider, scholar and storyteller, believer and skeptic. Born in Ireland and raised in America, Martin was a Jesuit priest who walked the halls of power inside the Vatican. Yet his voice would one day whisper warnings that unsettled the faithful. His life became a shadowy tale of confession and revelation, woven with the threads of ancient prophecy and modern fear. Martin served as a consultant for the Vatican, a man deeply versed in church doctrine and its inner workings. But his writings reveal a tension between the Church's public face and the hidden struggles he believed it faced. In books like Hostage to the Devil and the Jesuits, he spoke of spiritual battles raging beneath the surface, of evil forces manipulating the world's fate, and of corruption lurking even in the holiest places. His words carried a weight both terrifying and compelling, a quiet urgency beneath calm scholarship. He claimed to have witnessed things few dared to speak aloud, exorcisms that tested the limits of faith, secret factions within the Church, and a darkness threatening to unravel centuries of sacred tradition. Yet, Martin's story is also one of conflict within himself and within the institution he served. Some saw him as a courageous whistleblower, a guardian warning against unseen evils. Others dismissed him as a sensationalist, a man haunted by his own doubts. What was the secret he carried? Perhaps it was the knowledge that faith itself is a battlefield, not just against external foes, but against the shadows within. Martin's warnings about demonic influence and internal decay struck chords that still resonate today. They remind us that the Church, for all its sanctity, is vulnerable to the human frailties it teaches against. His life ended quietly in 2010, but his legacy remains, a testament to the tension between belief and doubt, between public doctrine and private. Fear, some say he was silenced, his warnings buried in the very archives he once served. Others believe his voice continues to echo in the hearts of those who seek truth behind the veil. Tonight, as sleep beckons softly, imagine Malachi Martin standing at a crossroads between light and shadow, between faith and skepticism. His story is not just about the church, but about the human struggle to find meaning in a world where mystery and reality intertwine. And as you drift, let his quiet urgency settle gently within you, a reminder that even in the grandest institutions, there are questions left unasked, secrets left unspoken, and truths waiting patiently to be heard. In the twilight hours of papal history, when whispers drift softly through the halls of the Vatican, there lies a pact unspoken, a silent understanding that shapes the very heart of the Church. This is not a public decree, nor a formal treaty inked on parchment, but a delicate balance between power and secrecy, between faith's demands and the weight of worldly truths. The Pope, as shepherd of millions, must often navigate this fragile tightrope. Throughout centuries, popes have faced choices that challenge the very essence of their mission. To reveal too much could fracture belief. To conceal too much could betray it. This silent pact is the Church's quiet shield, protecting the faithful from truths too heavy to bear, while safeguarding the institution itself. Behind each case is a human life, fragile, frightened, and often isolated. The Church's response is never fast. Psychological evaluation is always the first step. But when medical science falls short and prayers of healing no longer suffice, a different ritual is considered. The rite of exorcism is one of the oldest in Christianity, an unbroken line from ancient times to the present. And though it has evolved, its purpose has not: to confront evil not through power, but through the sacred. In 1999, the Church revised the rite for the first time in centuries, modernizing the language while preserving its gravity. Still, it is rarely used, and always with permission from the bishop, sometimes even from Rome itself. Why such secrecy? Because the stakes are high, and the dangers, though often misunderstood, are not imagined. The Vatican has quietly advised caution. For centuries, not everything that appears demonic is. Not every cry in the dark is what it seems. And some spirits are more human than hellish, yet the internal files tell us something profound. Not about devils, but about belief. About how deep human suffering can go, and how far the Church is willing to walk into that darkness with its faithful. They show a Church not simply preaching peace, but standing at the threshold of human torment with candle, prayer, and trembling conviction. Some say the Vatican holds far more than records, that proof of spiritual phenomena has been documented. Levitations, apparitions, battles waged in silence. Whether metaphor or miracle, truth or theology, these stories remain hidden, not to deceive but to protect, because belief is delicate, and the line between faith and fear can be thinner than a whisper. Among the most mysterious cases are those linked to saints, holy men and women said to have battled darkness directly. Padre Pio, the Italian mystic priest, spoke often of being attacked by demons in the night. His wounds, his visions, his prophecies, all recorded, reviewed, and partially archived by the Church. Some of those records remain sealed, not out of shame, but because not all experiences can be explained. Some are simply held with reverence and quiet awe. Tonight, as you lie in stillness, imagine one of those hidden rooms, a single desk, a worn, leather-bound ledger. A priest sits in silence, reading a file that crackles with time. The words are careful, the tone calm, but beneath it all, a life once shaken by something unseen. He closes the file, offers a prayer, and places the record back in its drawer, not as proof of evil, but as a testament to endurance. The files may remain locked. The stories may never reach the pulpit, but they are real to those who live them, and they remind us that the church, for all its mystery and grandeur, is also a place where the wounded are still brought to heal. Even when the wound is unseen, as your breath slows and sleep begins to draw near, let this chapter rest with you, not in fear, but in reflection, that there are those who walk into the shadows, not to celebrate them, but to carry others back into the light. In the labyrinth of Vatican secrets, few figures evoke as much intrigue as Malachi Martin, a man cloaked in paradox. Both priest and outsider, scholar and storyteller, believer and skeptic. Born in Ireland and raised in America, Martin was a Jesuit priest who walked the halls of power inside the Vatican. Yet his voice would one day whisper warnings that unsettled the faithful. His life became a shadowy tale of confession and revelation, woven with the threads of ancient prophecy and modern fear. Martin served as a consultant for the Vatican, a man deeply versed in church doctrine and its inner workings. But his writings reveal a tension between the church's public face and the hidden struggles he believed it faced. In books like Hostage to the Devil and the Jesuits, he spoke of spiritual battles raging beneath the surface, of evil forces manipulating the world's fate, and of corruption lurking even in the holiest places. His words carried a weight both terrifying and compelling, a quiet urgency beneath calm scholarship. He claimed to have witnessed things few dared to speak aloud, exorcisms that tested the limits of faith, secret factions within the church, and a darkness threatening to unravel centuries of sacred tradition. Yet, Martin's story is also one of conflict within himself and within the institution he served. Some saw him as a courageous whistleblower, a guardian warning against unseen evils. Others dismissed him as a sensationalist, a man haunted by his own doubts. What was the secret he carried? Perhaps it was the knowledge that faith itself is a battlefield, not just against external foes, but against the shadows within. Martin's warnings about demonic influence and internal decay struck chords that still resonate today. They remind youth that the church, for all its sanctity, is vulnerable to the human frailties it teaches against. His life ended quietly in 2010, but his legacy remains, a testament to the tension between belief and doubt, between public doctrine and private fear. Some say he was silenced, his warnings buried in the very archives he once served. Others believe his voice continues to echo in the hearts of those who seek truth behind the veil. Tonight, as sleep beckons softly, imagine Malachi Martin standing at a crossroads between light and shadow, between faith and skepticism. His story is not just about the church, but about the human struggle to find meaning in a world where mystery and reality intertwine. And as you drift, let his quiet urgency settle gently within you, a reminder that even in the grandest institutions, there are questions left unasked, secrets left unspoken, and truth waiting patiently to be heard. In the twilight hours of papal history, when whispers drift softly through the halls of the Vatican, there lies a pact unspoken, a silent understanding that shapes the very heart of the Church. This is not a public decree, nor a formal treaty inked on parchment, but a delicate balance between power and secrecy, between faith's demands and the weight of worldly truths. The Pope, as shepherd of millions, must often navigate this fragile tightrope. Throughout centuries, popes have faced choices that challenged the very essence of their mission. To reveal too much could fracture belief. To conceal too much could betray it. This silent pact is the Church's quiet shield, protecting the faithful from truths too heavy to bear, while safeguarding the institution itself. Some say this pact stretches back to the earliest days, when the papacy was both spiritual guide and political force. The popes learned that survival required discretion, that some secrets, though painful or dark, were better kept within the Vatican's stone walls. A delicate silence, a knowing glance in candlelit rooms, where decisions were made not in sermons, but in hushed conversations. In modern times, the nature of this pact remains both vital and controversial. From financial scandals to questions of doctrinal integrity, from hidden archives to whispered warnings of spiritual warfare, the Pope must weigh every truth against its potential to heal or harm. Pope Francis, with his call for transparency and reform, has challenged this tradition gently but firmly. Yet even he must honor the complexity of the pact, the Church's need to protect itself. Even while opening doors to light, there are moments when silence is a sacred act, and secrecy a reluctant servant to faith. This pact is not betrayal, but a guardian of continuity. It is a reminder that faith is not only about revelation, but also about trust in those who lead, who carry burdens unseen. The Pope's silent pact is a solemn promise to hold both truth and mystery in a trembling balance. Tonight, as the quiet deepens, imagine a Pope alone in his study, the weight of centuries pressing gently on his shoulders. He holds the Church's secrets like fragile glass, aware that one wrong move could shatter centuries of devotion. And yet, he knows that faith often grows stronger when tempered by silence and care. As you drift to sleep, let this thought rest softly in your mind, that in the heart of the Vatican, amidst whispers and shadows, there is a sacred pact, a quiet promise to protect the fragile light of belief, a promise made not with words, but with a silent understanding that some truths must wait until the world is ready to receive them. As the final echoes fade in the grand halls of the Vatican, and the candles gutter low beneath ancient frescoes, we find ourselves resting quietly at the edge of a vast, enduring mystery. What is truth within these walls? What secrets lie folded into time's soft embrace, hidden not to deceive, but to protect, to guard faith's fragile flame from the chill of harsh light? Throughout centuries, power and prayer have danced a delicate dance, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in shadow. From silent archives to whispered warnings, from broken crosses to silent pacts, the story of the Vatican is one of paradox, a place where sacred light meets human complexity. And perhaps this is where the greatest mystery lives, not in the hidden documents, not in whispered conspiracies, but in the quiet tension between belief and doubt, between the seen and the unseen. As you close your eyes, imagine the soft steps of those who walk these halls, priests, scholars, and seekers, alike carrying the weight of centuries, bearing both light and shadow with grace. Let your breath slow and your mind soften, knowing that some secrets are not lost, but held gently, waiting for the moment when the world is ready. Tonight, in the stillness between waking and dreaming, may you rest in the comfort of mystery, a mystery not of fear, but of hope, of faith quietly enduring beyond the walls. Good night.